Welcome in, everyone. Today we're diving into a case that shook Dothan, Alabama, back in '99, the unsolved murders of J.B. Hilton, Beasley and Tracy Hollot.
Yeah, two best friends.
Summer before their senior year.
Vanished after a night out.
Seems like a pretty normal night at first.
Right.
We've got news articles, court documents, even a whole podcast episode all dedicated to this.
Yeah, lots to unpack. A lot of twists and turns, false leads.
Definitely sounds like a challenge.
Oh, it is. This case went cold for almost 20 years. It's a tough one.
So these girls, JB and Tracy, they're just typical teenagers excited for one last party before school starts back up.
Right, a field party, end of summer thing.
But after a late night call to Tracy's mom, asking to stay out a bit later, they just disappear.
That phone call, that's important. Probably from a payphone, we think. Last contact anyone had with them.
Tracy's mom agreed to let her stay out just a few extra minutes, just to say hi to their friends.
Right, but by morning, both girls are gone.
And then it gets even more mysterious.
Right.
JB's car, a black Mazda 929, turns up abandoned on this remote road. Doors are unlocked, purses inside, wallets, even cash.
All there.
But the keys are missing.
It's strange, right? Almost like someone wanted it to look abandoned.
A deliberate attempt to mislead investigators.
Could be.
You know, it's surprising to me that the police didn't check the trunk right away.
Yeah.
The report mentions the police chief, who was a family friend, actually suggested it. And that's when things really change.
That's when they find the girls in the trunk, both dead.
Each with a single gunshot wound to the head.
Dead.
And of course, it's July in Alabama.
Fuck.
So the crime scene, well, it's already compromised.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, could that delay have impacted the investigation?
Possibly. We'll never know for sure, but it definitely adds another layer of complexity, and it was already complex.
Right. And some of the details are just strange. The girls are fully clothed, no signs of sexual assault, but their pants and shoes, muddy, even wet.
Like they were running through mud, maybe water, before they were killed.
It's a pretty significant detail, wouldn't you say? And it wasn't even noticed at the initial crime scene. Makes you think, what else might have been missed?
Yeah, it's a good point. Even a few hours can change a crime scene a lot. And that detail becomes even more important when they find out that, well, JB and Tracy never actually made it to that field party.
Really?
Witnesses there said they never saw them. So what happened after that phone call? It's a big question mark.
Okay, so then we have these witnesses who place the girls at a big little convenience store in Ozark.
Right.
Two women say they saw JB and Tracy asking for directions, and that Tracy used the payphone there to call her mom.
Makes sense.
They even described seeing a white pickup truck pull into the parking lot right after the girls left.
And there's surveillance footage.
Yeah.
We see the truck. Yeah. But no one getting out of it.
So was someone watching them? Did they follow them from the store?
It's possible.
Things are definitely getting complicated.
Oh, yeah.
And then a man, Johnny Barentine, comes forward, claims he witnessed the murders, even gave the killer a ride.
Yeah, Barentine. And this is where things get really interesting.
Interesting how?
His story, well, it starts to fall apart. Multiple accounts, all different, conflicting.
An unreliable narrator. Classic.
He even says at one point that he drove the killer away. Implicates himself.
So what was his motivation? Why lie?
Attention. Maybe he wanted to be part of it all.
But the investigators were skeptical, right?
Oh, yeah. They found holes in his alibi. He said he was out buying milk for his kids at 3 a.m, but the timeline didn't match up.
So they arrest him.
They do.
But then DNA evidence changes everything.
It does.
Semen found on JB's clothing, it didn't match Barentine at all.
Not at all. They had to let him go.
But now there's a new mystery. Who does that DNA belong to?
A big question.
Then things take another strange turn. Another double homicide, this time in Mississippi. Two teenage girls, Amanda Wellborn and Kelsey Bullock, also found shot to death.
Eerie similarity.
Young girls driving at night, bodies found in remote locations. Investigators thought there might be a connection.
They did. They even interviewed suspects from the Mississippi case. But the DNA didn't match. Ballistics showed different guns were used.
So back to square one. Must have been frustrating, especially for the families.
Definitely. It shows how important it is to stay objective, follow the evidence, even when things seem connected.
So, back in Alabama, the investigators start trying to figure out what happened to JB and Tracy.
Right. The main theory is that they were abducted, probably at gunpoint, either at the Big Little store or right after.
And there's a witness who reported hearing screams and gunshots near a remote road outside of town.
Right. And remember those muddy clothes.
Right.
The theory is they were forced from the car, ran through the mud and water trying to get away.
But they were caught.
And killed.
But without a suspect, the case just stalls. For years.
Years. One lead after another, nothing. They even looked at this convicted murderer, Eugene Utsi, whose victim was found near where JB and Tracy's car was abandoned. But it led nowhere.
16 years. The case goes cold, the families hold vigils, the community grieves, but no answers.
But then, a big breakthrough. Forensic science. Changes everything.
What happened?
The Golden State Killer case, solved in 2018 using this technique called genetic genealogy. New possibilities.
It's like science fiction, right? How does it even work?
So they take that unknown DNA profile and compare it to these public genealogy databases. Looking for family matches, even distant relatives, it can narrow down the suspects.
And the investigators in Ozark decided to try it. They submitted the DNA from JB's clothes.
Early 2019, they get a hit. A potential suspect. Coley McCraney.
And what's really creepy is McCraney was never even considered before. He lived in Ozark at the time, but was totally unknown to the investigation.
Completely off the radar.
And hold on, you're saying this guy lived near the dump site?
Yeah, not far. Yeah, it's another layer to it all.
That's chilling.
And get this. The day before the murders, McCraney was supposed to give a DNA sample for a paternity suit.
But he refused.
Refused. It was his legal right then, but looking back, it's suspicious.
Like he knew.
Maybe. And when they finally get a DNA sample from him, it's a match.
To the semen on JB's clothes. A direct match.
Direct match. They arrest him, charge him with capital murder and rape.
Finally, a break in the case.
But it's not over yet. The trial, it takes a long time. Pandemic delays, legal stuff, years pass.
And during the trial, McCraney changes his story.
Oh, yeah.
Says he and JB actually knew each other, that the sex was consensual. Even made up a story about meeting her at the mall and having car trouble near the Big Little store.
Trying to explain away the DNA. But it didn't really make sense.
Did the jury believe him?
His wife even testified, trying to back up his alibi. But it just raised more questions.
So what happened?
In the end, they saw through it. April 2023, Coley McCraney is found guilty. All 4 counts of capital murder.
Wow. After more than 20 years, JB and Tracy's families finally get justice.
It's bittersweet, but it's a testament to their strength and to the power of forensic science.
Absolutely, but it makes you think, what if this had gone to trial back in '99? Would the outcome have been different? How does time, all the different stories, fading memories, how does that affect a jury's decision?
It's a great question. And this case also brings up ethical questions about these new forensic tools. Like, genetic genealogy is powerful, but what about privacy? Consent?
Right, we want justice, but at what cost?
It's complicated. We need to balance the pursuit of justice with protecting individual rights.
And this case shows how technology is changing how we understand justice and accountability. It's a conversation we need to keep having.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, don't just accept information blindly. Question things. Look at different perspectives. Think about how these advancements are changing our world.
Exactly. So what have we learned? This case, it's tragic. It reminds us that darkness can be anywhere, but it's also about resilience, perseverance, and the fact that truth matters.
And it leaves us with a question. In a world where technology is changing how we see the past, how do we make sure justice wins, even when memories fade and time keeps moving?
It's something to think about. We encourage you to explore the resources we've provided, keep learning about this case, and what it all means.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Especially in cases like this one where it takes years, sometimes decades, to get justice. And, there's something else about this case, something I find fascinating. It's the whole idea of false confessions.
You mean Johnny Barentine, the guy who said he saw the murders, gave the killer a ride.
Exactly, yeah. It's a strange thing, right? Sometimes people, they just want attention. Or they feel like they have to be part of these big cases, even if they have to invent stories.
Like, they need to be part of the narrative, even if it means making things up.
Right, exactly. And it's a good reminder that witnesses, especially in these emotionally charged situations, they're not always reliable. You got to be careful.
I wonder what Barentine was thinking. Did he believe what he was saying? Or was he trying to mislead everyone?
It's tough to say. Psychologists and legal experts still debate this kind of thing. Was it a real memory, even if it was messed up? Or was it all a lie? We might never know.
It just shows you the human mind is a complicated thing, especially when things are stressful. But in this case, the DNA, it cleared Valentine. And speaking of DNA, I'm still blown away by that genealogy stuff. It's like something you'd see on TV.
It's an amazing tool, no doubt. And remember that Golden State Killer case. That's what really showed everyone how powerful this technique could be. But, there are some ethical issues there.
Right, like privacy. I mean, you want justice for the victims, but should the police be able to use these databases without our permission? It's a tough call.
It is. And it's something people are still talking about, trying to figure out where the line is.
Like opening a can of worms,
Yeah.
Right. Once it's out, you can't put it back. But going back to this case, I'm curious, how did they even find Coley McCraney? It seems like his name just appeared out of nowhere.
Well, once they got that DNA match, the one from the genealogy database, it was time to build a case. And don't forget, McCraney lived in Ozark back then, not far from where they found the girls.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. It's pretty creepy how close he lived to the dump site.
Right. And no one even knew his name during the original investigation. He was completely off the radar.
So what did they do then? Start digging into his life, see if he had any connection to JB and Tracy.
That's exactly what they did. They talked to his family, friends, anyone who might have known him back in 1999. Tried to find out if he had any criminal history or maybe a motive.
And that's where that paternity suit comes in, right? The one where he refused to give a DNA sample just a day before the murders?
Bingo. It's a huge red flag. He was allowed to say no back then, but now it looks pretty bad.
Almost like he knew. Like he knew the DNA would link him to something, even though the murders hadn't even happened yet. It's a strange thought.
It adds another layer to this whole thing. And remember, at first, McCraney said he never even knew JB or Tracy. But as they found more evidence, his story changed.
Yeah, he said they had a relationship, that it was consensual, even made up this whole story about meeting at the mall and having car trouble by the Big Little store. Sounded like he was grasping at straws, trying to explain the DNA.
And it didn't really add up. His story didn't match what other people said or the evidence they found.
And then his wife testified at the trial, tried to back up his alibi, but honestly, it just made things more confusing.
It happens a lot, Try to cover up a lie, tell another lie, and then another, and eventually it all falls apart.
And it did fall apart. The jury didn't believe him. They found him guilty of capital murder. But it wasn't a quick process. That trial went on forever, especially with all the pandemic delays.
Yeah, these complex cases are tough. Both sides, the prosecution and the defense, they have a lot of work to do. It's all about presenting the evidence, telling a story, and trying to convince the jury.
And in this case, the DNA evidence, it was just too much to ignore. But I have to say, JB and Tracy's families, they never gave up. That's incredible, after all those years.
It's a beautiful thing, really. They kept fighting for justice, kept their daughter's memories alive, and in the end, they helped bring their killer to justice. It's a testament to love and the strength of the human spirit.
The verdict can't bring the girls back, but at least it gives them some closure. And it proves that they were right to believe the truth would come out eventually. It's a reminder that even when things seem hopeless, the truth has a way of coming out. But this case also makes you think about how memory works and how time can change how we see things.
Right. After all that time, how do you know what you remember is really what happened? Our memories, they're not perfect. They can be changed, twisted, even just fade away.
And in this case, with all the different stories and changing narratives, the jury probably had to rely a lot on the physical evidence, like the DNA.
That's a good point. Did they focus on the science more than the witness statements, which were all over the place? Or was it a mix of both? We'll never know for sure what happened in that jury room, but their decision shows how important forensic science is these days.
This whole case, it's been a wild ride, but it really shows how investigations are changing. It's not just about eyewitnesses and clues anymore. Technology, things like DNA and genetic genealogy, they're solving crimes in ways we never could before.
It's revolutionary, but we have to be careful too. As these tools become more powerful, we need to have serious conversations about what it all means. About ethics.
Exactly. Getting justice is important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of people's rights and privacy. It's a balancing act, and we have to get it right. Yeah, it really makes you think about how much things are changing, right? The technology, the laws, everything. But we can't forget about the people involved. This isn't just about DNA and science. It's about two girls who were murdered and the families they left behind.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get lost in the details of the case, but at the end of the day, this is a story about loss and about trying to find some peace after something horrible happens.
And for JB and Tracy's family, it was years of not knowing, years of frustration, and just incredible sadness. I can't even imagine what that must have been like.
It's amazing, really, how strong they were. They never gave up, they kept fighting for justice, and they never let people forget their daughters. And finally, after all that, they helped put their daughter's killer behind bars.
It just shows you, even when things seem impossible, you can't give up hope. And even though the verdict won't bring the girls back, at least their families know what happened. They know the truth.
It's a sense of closure,
Yeah.
right? And it shows that all their hard work, their belief that the truth would come out, it wasn't in vain. It paid off.
It also shows how important it is to keep improving forensic science. And we need people in law enforcement who are dedicated to solving these cold cases, no matter how old they are.
Absolutely. Technology like genetic genealogy is giving us new ways to look at old cases, and it's bringing justice to people who thought they'd never see it.
It's amazing what we can do now, compared to even just a few years ago. And for anyone out there who's going through something similar, who's lost someone and still looking for answers, this case, it gives you hope. It shows that even after years of silence, the truth can still come out.
That's a really important message. This case, it's a beacon of hope for anyone who's still fighting for their loved ones. It shows that if you keep going, if you believe in the power of truth and science, you might just get the answers you're looking for.
It reminds us that even though justice can be slow, it can still happen. And while this deep dive into JB and Tracy's murders has been full of twists and turns and some really sad moments, it ends with hope. Hope for the future of forensic science, hope for families who are still waiting for answers, and hope for a world where justice always wins no matter what.
And it's a reminder to all of us, we need to stay informed. We need to be part of the conversation about how the justice system works and how it can be better. We all have a responsibility to make sure it protects the innocent and holds the guilty accountable.
It's a conversation that we need to keep having, definitely. So for everyone listening, we encourage you to keep learning about this case, dig into the resources we've provided, and really think about what all this means for our society. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a journey, but it's one that reminds us how important truth, memory, and the fight for justice really are.